My name is Odessa Marsh. I'm 31 years old. And 3 months ago, my mother called me the night before my sister's engagement dinner to tell me not to come. Not because I'd done anything wrong. Not because there was some conflict I didn't know about. She said, "The venue has a strict head count." Sweetheart. And we already confirmed the final numbers with the restaurant on Tuesday. It would just be easier if you sat this one out. You understand. Don't you? I understood. I'd been understanding for 29 years. My sister, Camille, is 3 years older than me. Growing up, she was the one who got the birthday parties with the matching balloon arches. The one whose acceptance letter to Vanderbilt got framed and hung in the hallway between the coat closet and the powder room. The one my mother introduced to strangers at church as our little go-getter. I was just the younger one. The quiet one. The one who, somewhere around age 11, stopped raising her hand to be picked and started building something else instead. Something nobody in my family ever thought to ask me about. 6 weeks ago, I was standing in my apartment in Charleston, South Carolina, folding laundry, when my phone rang, and it was my grandmother. She never calls unless something has happened. Her voice was shaking in a way I hadn't heard since my grandfather's funeral. Except this wasn't grief. It was something closer to disbelief. "Why didn't you tell any of us?" she said. "Tell you what?" "Grandma. Honey. It's in the magazine. Let me start from the beginning. I grew up in a house where ambition was handed out unevenly. The way some people have a favorite mug and just reach for it without thinking. My mother, Patricia, was never cruel about it, exactly. She just had a preference. And she organized 18 years of parenting around that preference without ever once calling it by its name. Camille got new school clothes every August. I wore her hand-me-downs until I was old enough to buy my own with babysitting money. I'm not telling you this because we were poor. We weren't. It was a choice. A small one. Repeated so many times across so many years that eventually the smallness stopped mattering and the total started to... The one thing I had going for me, the one thing nobody in my house paid attention to, was my palate. I know how that sounds. But I was the kid who could tell you whether my mother had used real vanilla or imitation in the pound cake. I could taste the difference between butter that had browned for 4 minutes and butter that had browned for 6. My mother thought this was a strange and slightly irritating quirk. Camille thought it was weird. My father, who was not an unkind man, but was not a particularly observant one either, just figured I was picky. By 17, I knew exactly what I wanted. Not home cooking. Not catering platters for baby showers. Real cooking. Restaurant cooking. The kind where you lie awake at 2 in the morning thinking about a beurre blanc and you get up and write it down in the dark so you don't lose it. I told my parents when I was filling out college applications. My mother's response was to print out a list of communications programs at 3 different state schools and leave it on my desk. My father said, "Cooking's a nice hobby. Des. Camille." 20 at the time, and already engaged to the first of 2 men she would eventually leave at the altar of a relationship. Said, "You'd be on your feet all day. Doesn't that sound miserable?" I applied to the Culinary Institute of America anyway. I didn't tell anyone until the acceptance letter arrived. Even then, nobody framed it. I worked through the entire program 2 jobs. A shared apartment with 3 roommates who all cooked for each other at midnight when nobody could sleep. The kind of exhaustion that somehow still felt like the first time I'd ever been fully awake. After graduation, I staged unpaid at 2 restaurants in New York. The way you do when you're building something and can't afford to be impatient. Then I landed a real position under a chef in the West Village, who communicated almost entirely in what was wrong, and almost never in what was right. And who, without question, taught me more than anyone else ever has. 3 years later, He made one phone call on my behalf to a friend opening a new restaurant in Charleston. I packed my car in a weekend. I took the sous chef position. 14 months after that, I was named head chef. The restaurant is called Marlowe's. It's in a converted cotton warehouse 2 blocks off the water. And on a Good Friday night, we turned the dining room twice. I never told my family any of this in real time. Not because I was hiding it, but because they'd stopped asking a long time before that. And I had stopped offering things to people who'd shown me, repeatedly, that they didn't want them. My mother knew I did something with restaurants. Once, at a cousin's baptism, I heard her tell a woman from her book club, "We keep hoping Odessa finds something more stable. You know how creative types are." The woman nodded sympathetically. I smiled and went to help clear the dessert table, because old habits die slow. My sister's engagement dinner was held at a place called the Iron Gate, one of the nicer rooms in Richmond, Virginia, about 90 minutes from where I grew up. Her fiancé, Grant, is a pleasant, uncomplicated man who sells insurance and coaches his nephew's Little League team on weekends. They'd been together 2 years when she called to tell me she was engaged. Her exact words were, "We're doing a dinner at the Iron Gate on the 14th, just so you know and don't accidentally book something." I had not been invited. She was letting me know so I wouldn't feel bad about not being included. The consideration was almost thoughtful, in its own backward way. 2 days before the dinner, my mother sent the text about the head count. I didn't respond. I went to work. Here is what I did not know on the night of my sister's engagement dinner. 2 things were happening at the exact same time, and I had nothing to do with either one. The first time's Culinary Digest, the national food magazine, had published its annual 30 chefs to watch list that morning. I was on it. The profile had gone live at 9 a.m. 4 photographs, a short write-up, and a quote I'd given a writer months earlier and completely forgotten about, because I have never once in my life found it easy to sit still and talk about myself. The quote read times, "I grew up in a house where nobody really looked at me twice. I think that's why I cook the way I do. Everything I make to be noticed." The second, the Iron Gate, the exact restaurant hosting my sister's dinner, sourced 3 of its dishes that night, both appetizers and the featured short rib from Cypress Creek Farm, the same small supplier Marlowe's had worked with for 2 years and helped put on the regional map. The restaurant's events coordinator, a woman who had eaten at Marlowe's twice and knew exactly who I was, had printed a small supplier note on that evening's menu cards. My name was on it. I was at work when my phone started buzzing against the pass. I ignored it. I'm always at work, and I don't check my phone during service. It was a Saturday. We were fully booked, and I had 2 private parties in the back room. I didn't look at my messages until almost 11. There were 16 missed calls. 7 from my mother, 4 from my grandmother, 2 from a number I didn't recognize, which turned out to be my Aunt Deb calling from a new phone. 1 from Camille, followed by a voicemail that ran 51 seconds, which I'll come back to. I sat down on the concrete step outside the kitchen's back door, still in my chef's coat, and called my grandmother first. She picked up on the first ring. "Why didn't you tell any of us?" That's when I found out. She read me the Times Culinary Digest Times piece over the phone. Slowly. Every word. While I sat in the alley behind my restaurant at 11:15 at night holding the phone with both hands. When she finished, she said, "Odessa, do you understand what you've done? Thank you, Grandma. I've been telling my church friends for years that you were going to do something remarkable. I just never had proof to show them. Now I do." I wasn't at my sister's engagement dinner, but I heard about it in pieces from my grandmother. From Aunt Deb the next morning with barely concealed delight, and from my cousin Priya, who'd come as a +1 and sent me a voice memo at 1 in the morning that was mostly just her whispering and trying not to laugh. 30 guests. Family on both sides. A handful of Grant's co-workers. My mother had picked the Iron Gate specifically because she wanted something that would impress Grant's family, who apparently had money in the kind of understated way that made my mother self-conscious. The menu cards went out before anyone had touched their water glasses. That's when the evening started going off script. Grant's older sister, a woman named Renata, who happens to write a regional food column, picked up her menu card and read the supplier note out loud without thinking much of it. Then she stopped. "Is anyone here related to an Odessa Marsh?" My mother said. "I'm sorry." "What?" Renata held up the card. Odessa Marsh. She just made Times, Culinary Digest's Times 30 to watch list this morning. Her restaurant's the supplier on tonight's menu. That's honestly a huge deal. There was a pause. According to Priya, it went on long enough to become its own kind of answer. "Marsh is my maiden name," my mother said finally. Is that your daughter?" "She's our younger one," my mother said. "She's in the restaurant business." By the time the first course arrived, 4 people at Grant's end of the table had already pulled the article up on their phones. The photograph shows me in the kitchen at Marlowe's, standing in front of the pass, not smiling exactly, just looking straight into the camera like I know precisely where I am and precisely what it cost me to get there. One of Grant's cousins turned his screen toward Camille. "She looks just like you. Is this your sister?" "Yes," Camille said. Priya told me it sounded like a door closing. Here's what my mother did next. And I know it's accurate because Aunt Deb was close enough to hear every word. She leaned toward Grant's mother and said, in a voice that was not nearly as quiet as she thought, "We're very proud of her. Of course. She's always been the independent one. Doesn't stay in touch much. But that's just how she is." Grant's mother nodded politely. Aunt Deb, who has never once in her life let a comment like that pass unanswered, said from across the table. "She stays in touch with me plenty. And with Mama? Last I checked. She invited all of us to that restaurant twice, and not a single one of you went." My mother's smile went thin. Didn't she send you 2 a gift card for your anniversary last year? I remember. Because she called to ask for your schedules. That part is true. I'd arranged a comped dinner for my parents at Marlowe's for their anniversary, my treat. My kitchen. My best table. My mother said she'd look at the calendar. They never came. The table got quiet in that particular way. A room gets quiet when strangers realize they've stumbled into something they weren't supposed to see. Grant cleared his throat and said, "Well, we'll have to make a reservation ourselves. I hear Marlowe's is excellent." Camille didn't say anything at all. The rest of the dinner went on. Courses came and went. The food, I'm told, was genuinely good, including the short rib that owed part of its flavor to a farm I'd spent 2 years helping build a relationship with. But the article didn't disappear from the table. By the end of the night, 5 different guests had congratulated my mother on raising a daughter who'd just been named one of the best young chefs in the country. Each time, she said some version of, "We're very proud." In the flat tone of someone reading cue cards she'd only just been handed. My sister's engagement was not the main topic of conversation at her own engagement dinner. I want to be clear that I take no pleasure in saying that. I didn't do anything to make it happen. I just existed. And worked. And the work existed whether anyone in my family was paying attention to it or not. The voicemail from Camille ran 51 seconds. The first 6 seconds were silence. Then, "I genuinely don't know how you managed to make my engagement dinner about you without even times being times there. I hope you're happy." A pause. Her voice dropping lower. Culinary Digest. Odessa. You couldn't have called me first, she hung up. I listened to it twice. Then I deleted it. I hadn't made anything about myself. I'd simply stopped hiding. I called my grandmother back the next morning and we talked for almost an hour. She told me she'd been mispronouncing the name of my restaurant for 2 years, telling her friends I worked somewhere called Marlowe's Grill, which doesn't exist. She laughed about it. I laughed too. Then she said, quieter, I should have asked more. I should have called you directly instead of just believing whatever your mother told me. I told her she hadn't done anything wrong. She said, will you cook for me sometime? At the real place, I said. Grandma, I'll cook for you anywhere you want. Anytime, she said. Good. Because I think I've been missing out for years. My mother called 2 days after the dinner. I let it ring through to voicemail. What she left was, in its own strange way, a small masterpiece of avoidance. She said she hoped I was doing well. She said the dinner had been lovely. She said we should catch up sometime soon, near the end, almost as an afterthought. She said, I know we haven't always been as supportive as we could have been. I think that's just been a communication issue on both sides. A communication issue. I listened to the message while prepping for lunch service. My hands moving through the familiar rhythm of mise en place. Butter starting to foam in the pan. Garlic just turning translucent. I set the phone face down on the steel counter, and I did not call her back. My father texted me a week later. He has never once called when a text was available to him. It read, Time saw the article. Sounds like things are going well. Your mother and I would like to come by the restaurant sometime, if that's all right with you. I read it on my break, standing outside with coffee going cold in my hand. It wasn't an apology. It didn't mention the anniversary dinner they never showed up for, or the years of she does something with restaurants, or the engagement dinner I hadn't been invited to. It was just a door, cracked open a few inches. I sat with that text for almost 2 weeks before I answered. When I finally did, I wrote times I'd like that. Text me when you're planning to be in Charleston, and I'll hold you a table. Not forgiveness. Not yet. And maybe not ever in the exact shape people usually mean when they use that word. But a possibility. A small one. The kind you hold with both hands. Loosely. The way you carry something that might crack if you grip it too tightly. My sister has not reached out. I've thought about what I'd say to her if she ever does. And I've decided I don't need a speech prepared. I don't need a moment. The truth doesn't require staging. It already happened, whether anyone was watching or not. Here's what I know now, standing where I'm standing. I spent years cooking in rooms where nobody from my family ever showed up to watch. I sent invitations that went unanswered more times than I can count. I built a career that nobody in my house ever asked a single question about. And none of it slowed me down. If anything, the silence turned into its own kind of freedom. When nobody's watching, there's nobody left to disappoint but yourself. And I decided a long time ago I wasn't going to be the one who let me down. I'm standing in the kitchen at Marlowe's right now. It's 6:30 in the morning. A full 2 hours before my line cooks show up. And the light coming through the east window has that pale gold color you only get in late October. The farm delivery came 40 minutes ago. There's a crate of end-of-season figs on the steel counter that I haven't decided what to do with yet. I'll figure it out. I always do. There's a frame hanging on the wall by the pass that I put up about a month ago. It holds the Times Culinary Digest Times page. Not because I need it to feel real, and not because I need anyone's permission to believe in what I built. I know exactly what this cost me. I put it there so that on the quiet mornings, before the noise of the day starts, I can look at it and remember that it happened, that it was real, that I built it from a place where nobody in my family was looking. And it still turned out to be enough. If you're in the middle of your own version of this right now, cooking, building, writing, raising something, becoming something that nobody in your family has bothered to ask you about, I want to say this to you directly. It is enough to be seen by your own work. It is enough to build something that knows your name. Even on the days when the people who are supposed to know it best don't bother to learn it. The recognition might come, or it might not. Your family might come around, or they might not. But what you're building is real either way, and it doesn't need their applause to stay real. Don't cook, or build, or write, or work for anyone's applause. Do it because the work itself is honest, and because somewhere down the line, in a room you haven't even imagined yet, someone is going to experience what you made and feel exactly what you meant them to feel. That's enough. It has always been enough. The figs are waiting. The kitchen is mine. And for the first time in a long time, I don't need anybody's invitation to stand in the rooms I built for myself.